Welcome to the Gallery Date. I'm Jenn Singer, founder of Jenn Singer Gallery. Thanks for joining me for our weekly date to chat about art and life and perhaps the art of life, all in bite-sized, not at all fancy, but definitely savory episode nuggets. Let's mingle, my friends. Don't forget to press record, Jen.
Hey there. Thanks so much for joining me today for our gallery date. I am so happy to see you. Thank you for joining me today. I've been so looking forward to this episode. I get to host my first ever guests on the show, Jeanine Hayes and Bryan at the AphroChic. This is a really special episode because I get to sit down with Jeanine and Bryan to discuss their new book launching on November 15, 2022, titled AphroChic, Celebrating the Legacy of the Black Family Home. It is a powerful, visually stunning celebration of Black-owned homes, featuring inspiring interiors and family histories of notable Black Americans, including Chef Alexander Smalls and actor Danielle Brooke. With engaging text and beautiful photographs by the late Patrick Klein, this book amplifies many issues currently faced by African Americans, including gentrification, redlining, and more, highlighting the Black family home as a missing piece in the narrative of both interior design and American history, showcasing the amazing diversity of the Black experience through striking art and heirloom-filled interiors, stories of family and community, and histories exploring the obstacles Black homeowners have faced for generations. This groundbreaking book honors the journey, recognizes the struggle, and celebrates the joy. For more than a decade, AphroChic has been documenting the Black family home and Black contributions in the world of design through projects with HGTV and House Beautiful, and in their own publication, AphroChic Magazine. Jeanine Hayes and Bryan are the authors of Remix, Decorating with Culture, Objects, and Soul. Their media and design brand, AphroChic, celebrates African diaspora cultures through their lifestyle magazine, podcast, and product lines, which are available through Paragold and First Dibs. The couple resides in upstate New York in their lovingly named Afro farmhouse. And now, without further ado, Jeanine and Bryan. AphroChic's in the house. Hello. This is so exciting.
Glad to be here.
Jeanine and Bryan, I am so excited to see you both. Welcome to the gallery date.
You're getting us in the morning. We are not morning folks, but we got up to talk to you.
So sorry.
I want you to know this
I know the
is
time
only
difference.
for you.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So we're like, oh my God, 10 o'clock. Like,
10
I
o'clock
know,
is
I'm
not
sorry.
something we would do for anyone.
that is okay. We were like, only for Jen would we do this.
I love y'all so much.
We're
Sorry, hold
really
on.
excited to be here. I mean, it's like, we don't get to see you that often. So anytime we get to talk to you, we're so happy to be able to.
Yeah, we're all kind of like Brooklyn, like New York expats at this point. So unfortunately, we don't get to hang out like we used to. But no, we used to love coming by your gallery and just kind of hanging out in the area, walking around. It's one of those New York memories that just kind of keeps popping up for us. So.
Yeah.
Oh, I miss those days so much. I miss y'all so much. So
we miss you too.
Yeah, anyway, well, we're gonna have some catching up to do, but well, thank you so much. You are my first ever interviewees on the show. And a huge congratulations on your new book. It's dropping in November. And it's called AphroChic, Celebrating the Legacy of the Black Family Home. It is not only visually stunning, you guys, but the personal stories of home and culture and history drew me in, and they are so moving. I love this book. I've known you both for years now, obviously. I think it's been like 8 years, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to do the math, and I was like, I think it's been 8 years. And since I've known you, you continue to create, build, grow, and inspire. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. So my first question is, how are you feeling about the launch?
I mean, I think with every book, this is the second one, and you're just really happy to get it out. I think that's kind of it, and people do compare, even people who've had children compare it to having children. It's great. we got here. This now it's time for you to go out and and us to start this journey. So I think we're just really excited for people to be able to read it in November. And this time actually talking to people before, it actually is out in bookstores for sale. We've just really enjoyed the response that people have had to the book so far, and the enthusiasm for it. Because I think for us, it was just a book that we wanted to do, and we felt like hadn't been done before, and was going to broaden a conversation, and people are getting that. So that's actually been a really cool feeling for us.
Yeah, it's really cool to kind of to be doing this again. I mean, I can't say we never really expected to write the first book until it kind of came up. And then, even when the second book came up, we were like, all right, well, this really seems like it's the right time. And it's, we're positioned perfectly for the conversation that we want to have. They do kind of, they're not necessarily like direct sequels, but they kind of fit together. So if Remix is sort of the start of a conversation, we kind of see the Black Family Home as the continuation of that conversation. So in the first one, we were very much about, here is how you use the different pieces of interior design to tell a story, and celebrating the Black Family Home. The point is really to now let's start talking about the story, like these stories that we have to tell. And a lot of it just going along with not really seeing a lot of Black homes represented in design books, on TV, things like that. But then also, we didn't want to create something that simply showed Black people in luxurious homes, because there's so much to the question of home and to the issue of housing for Black Americans that a fuller story needed to be told. And, thankfully, we were able to tell that in whatever small part we could, to try and bring together just enough to give a sense of how wide and pervasive, but also how meaningful and important on so many levels this story is.
Yes, I love the depth that it gets into, and history, and the history of home and the Black experience. So, you mentioned in the book that the Black family home is a vibe, more than just a place where people live. It's a feeling, and this book has a whole vibe, y'all. I can tell you that. I can put it down, to be honest. I usually have to do like audiobooks because I work a lot and I have a toddler. So I only usually get to listen to books while I'm working out. But I got this digital, galley copy and started reading it. And I was like, cancel everything. I'm busy. Mama's busy. Don't bother me. Emails off. No emails. Poor little Maddox was just like, he was like, Mama, Mama. I was like, no, Mama has to finish this book. So I was into it.
We love to hear that. We love to hear that. That's awesome. Really Sorry, Maddox. Sorry.
Yeah, apologies to Maddox.
He gives plenty of mama time.
We love that, though. That's something very hugely important to us, because, when you write a design book, when you're working in design, everything it's about the visuals, and that's always the constant give and take in our book writing process is, having space for the imagery, but also, the words, because, for us, the words count, the words matter, and we want the two to work together. So we don't want the words to just sort of be decoration around the pictures. We're actually trying to say something and tell a story, so that you were able to find the text and be engaged by the text is it's super encouraging for us, because it means that we created something that's, readable and worth reading.
It is. And it's not just a coffee table book. I'll tell you that. It's not. It's like a book people need to read. So well done on making that happen. Like you brought it all together, and the stories there. There's so many stories. They're amazing. You continue that quote that I read by saying, it comes from the food we eat, the music we hear, the stories we share. It comes from the elders in our families, the ones who teach us to act right, be quiet, and pay attention. I know those elders. And the ones with stories, recipes, and lessons that we never forget. Whether an apartment, a condo, or a house, a new build, or generational home, the feeling is the same. Home is like soul, indescribable, but you know it when you feel it and you miss it when it's gone. Much of that feeling is carried in the unique aesthetic that defines African American design. And I think the soul of a home is the thing that often gets lost in design. I think it's really easy to, like, in interior design, to lose that feeling and that vibe that you convey in the book. And, throughout the book, through the storytelling of each of the featured homeowners, you feel their connections to the soul's past and present in their families and traditions. And it's a connection that I think can only come from and inspire authenticity and design, and really create a vibe that you describe and that's conveyed throughout the book.
Thank you. Really cool. Thank you so much. I mean, I think that, one of the things I think that we're always trying to get at, and Bryan and I, you've known us for years, we like to tell stories. I mean, that really is what we do. I think that's kind of...
Y'all tell great stories too.
We love the narrative, and we do it by writing, and we also do it by design, by designing spaces. For us, it's about less about like, oh, let's bring in pretty furniture, and more about like, who are you? How do you want your home to feel? How do you want your home to sound? And, it's also great talking with you as a gallerist, because art plays a huge role in that vibe. Like it, like if you don't have art in your home, like, sad to say, it's soulless. Like you're just not, totally. There's something missing. And when we are talking to people, whether we're looking through the amazing homes in this book where you see art all through these interiors, what we're really talking about is art that people have a connection to, and that it helps them tell their own story in a better way. So when people walk in their home, those pieces are really helping describe bits of themselves.
Yeah, I think that what we love about art, especially from a design perspective, is it's from a narrative perspective, rather, is it's where you can be blatant. The colors you're using, the furniture you bring in, the knickknacks, the things that are kind of scattered, like these are all things that can evoke, but art can say. You can say what's important to you. You can say what you mean. You can, so, and then for us, like a lot of the really amazing art moments in this are things that you wouldn't necessarily automatically think of. So we have one woman in North Carolina who actually built with her own two hands, constructed a giant cotton tree.
Yes, that was Shauna. Was that Shauna?
Shauna, yeah.
Yeah.
And so Shauna, she did this to really reflect her family's relationship to cotton, which, we all have that basic understanding of what the African American relationship to cotton historically has been. But for her family, that relationship is the same. But at a certain point, her family became landowners. They became cotton farmers because that was what they knew coming out of slavery. And because of that, because of the success of that business, everyone, all of the children and grandchildren of the family were able to go on, become highly educated and move on. So cotton really became, as much as it was part of a burdensome history, it was also became the foundation for a bright future for that family. And so, like, this is part of why the book is constructed the way that it is, and the way like there's always so many things that we're trying to include and so many things we're trying to push. One of the things is the ways in which the Black experience is understood in this country, because it's part of the outcome of the lack of representation, or the constant fight for representation, is the Black experience is always presented in these very, very small number of very limiting tropes. And what we're trying to do is actually show that there's a diversity of that experience, even back in the points of history where we feel like everyone had the same experience. They didn't. Even in the point like today where we go, well, Black people are either this or they're that. Well, everyone in this book has a different experience. Everyone's coming from a different place. There are points of connection. And so we're using that larger narrative that we weave through the Journey of Home sections to kind of show where these pieces are, how they all fit as part of, as the outgrowths of this larger history. We're trying to put human faces on a historical story. And we're also trying to give personal stories a historical context, because there's a different level of understanding that comes when you can put those two together. And for this particular story, this missing character that we say the Black family home is, that story has to be understood in context, but also, as we say in the book, from different angles. You know, we have to get as close as to tell of an individual story, and we have to get far enough away to look at it as it's developed over a span of generations in order to really begin to understand what we're seeing. The other thing I'm going to point real quick that we try to push is just kind of the understanding of what design is. You know, we said before, design we usually is pretty things arranged skillfully in a room. But through it, we can start to tell these bigger stories and these wider stories, and look at a lot of things as they've developed over time.
Right.
And I'll stop.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I think just going back to the art piece, oh my goodness, you cannot miss the art in these homes in the book. I especially love how much figurative art is in the collections of these homeowners. All I could think of to say, like, when I was like, representation matters, artists, representation matters. That's like, I really like that just kept on coming up when I was looking at the collections. I also love seeing works by two of the nicest and most talented artists that the three of us have the joy and pleasure of knowing, Jerome Lagarigue and Tim Okamura. I love those guys, and I was so happy to see their works on the walls of such beautiful, inspiring homes, including yours. So that was cool. You know, but from what I can see in these images, art is critical and is everywhere, which I really love, and it really does reflect that. You know, the soul of the house that we keep on talking about, the soul of the home. So
and that was something that we wanted to celebrate, because growing up just culturally in African American homes, art is there. It's never been something that was like, oh, like you have to be some sort of like big collector or, you know, anything like that. It's not, you know, treated necessarily as something that you're doing to either show success or maybe to have, you know, pieces that, you know, or have value so that you can sort of have them financially.
Right. Trophy art.
You know, they're there that, you know, they're just pieces that people have loved and enjoyed. And they get
passed down through generations, right?
Yes. And passed down. And so I think that that's something that we just grew up with. We thought about that, like, oh, you know, our grandparents, people had art at home, and parents, art was in the home. And so seeing that reflected in the book was something that was just really special for us, because it is such something that's such a big part of the culture. And yes, we have our Tim Okamura piece in our library, and we love that piece. And it was the perfect piece for us because it expressed something that we love: powerful warrior Black woman. And I can actually say I have a husband who is very much like, if we're going to have art in the house, I only want it to be women. So
I love it. Bryan, always been a big fan.
So I'm like, oh, okay, fine. You know, so that piece was so perfect. It satisfied that this powerful woman. Bryan is a martial artist. And so, you know, her as the samurai also was just, you know, so cool as well. And so that piece for us was just something that we gravitated towards. And I think that's the amazing and beautiful thing about the art you'll find throughout these homes is people who have collected pieces that just add to their own story. I love in Stacey Blake's home, the gallery wall she has in her son's room, and just positive art for them.
That's it.
That are, you know, they wake up to and see in the day, and it's just positive. And so I think that utilizing art to tell one story and to also be able to be inspiring to yourself and to future generations is something that is beautifully done and woven in throughout the stories in the book.
Yeah, and then you also have, like we said, that personal connection. So talking about the cotton tree, but then we also have Jason Reynolds, who part of the art in his home is a framed rejection letter that his grandmother received because she wasn't able to read and write from it was actually, I believe it was a custodial job, but because she couldn't read and write, they wouldn't give it to her. For him as an author, that becomes a source of daily inspiration because he says, "I work with words," and he has this whole amazing take on what he does and how he does it, and so much of it coming from this moment in his grandmother's life, and then just kind of seeing like things like that and the ways in which even things like photography will get blended. We have a couple of homes where, classic historical photographs are blended with family photographs and gallery walls. And so you have these amazing black and white jazz age photos. And then next to it, we're like, oh, that's my auntie. So being able to kind
Love it.
move all of that together and show them, case them all, because, you're claiming really all of this is part of your experience. All of this is part of your heritage and part of the story of, who you are and how you got into this space. And really all of it points to, as we talk about a little bit about what, African-American design is and, how it's understood and how it feels and, the kind of the things that make it up. And understanding those things, start to see where that vibe comes from and how it's constructed. And most of all, why it's so very much needed.
Yes. I think it's really needed. I think, like the richness of the images. And I have to say, it wouldn't be right to speak about the beautiful images in this book if we didn't mention Patrick Klein, the brilliant photographer who I think he photographed pretty much everything in the book. Is that correct?
Yeah. Everything.
Two homes.
Two homes.
But yes,
there were a couple of, that's what I thought. Yeah. But he photographed the interiors of these homes, and he sadly passed away this summer. So we're sending lots of love out to Patrick. I remember you introduced
Thank you for mentioning him.
Yeah, I remember you introduced me to him years ago, and he's just the loveliest person. So I know he's going to be greatly missed.
He was incredible to work with, and we miss him tremendously, and feel like he's on this journey with us, in some way. But he did shoot 14 of the homes in this book, and one of the reasons we worked with Patrick, and we worked together for, I think we said
over 10 years.
Like 13 years in total that we worked and collaborated on projects, is because Patrick was one of the few photographers that shot on film, and in understanding film, understood how you really got to the soul of a space. And even though he shot this book digitally, his eye for what matters in a room is something that was, no one else could do what he did. And we really wanted to be able to show the soul of these homes. And people ask all the time, a lot of times when people do books, the reality is you go into these spaces and you basically, just like in magazines, you come in with all your own stuff and you style them the way that you want them to look.
That's right.
This is not any of these homes in this book. This is how these people live, and this is very authentic. And Patrick was able to go into their authentic space and capture how they live.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we loved most about Patrick, because we've been on those shoots where you go into a space and everything's great, but you take it all out and you put it in, everybody, and just what we love so much about Patrick is he shot what was there.
Yes.
And that was where the beauty came from, and that was so much of where the soul came from, and that was always what we wanted, because it was always like, well, we don't want to make up what this person's home is, just like we don't want to make up what this person's story is. We want to show the beauty of what's there. And just, I guess, talking a little bit about the experience of creating this book, because it was written in a pandemic, where we're talking about it now in a pandemic, and one that actually did hit us personally. Jeanine and I both had COVID. I recovered, but Jeanine has long COVID, and so we weren't really able to travel. Patrick, the 14 homes that he shot on his own. We weren't able to be there. We weren't able to travel with him. And
that was one of my questions, was how, how did COVID impact, because I know your stories. I know Jeanine struggled with long COVID. So how did it impact the development and creation of this book?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, COVID definitely threw a wrench, into all of our lives, and one of the things, because like Bryan said, I have long COVID, and that is a journey of navigating a lot of different chronic illnesses that are complex and kind of come together, and you have to really take care of your body. Like, you just really can't, there's no day where you can be lax at all. But we still knew we wanted to finish the book, no matter what was challenging about my health. And that was important because we felt like it was like this window, this moment. And even though the publisher was great and was like, you can wait another year, it was just one of those things where, like, I don't know if this moment will be here the same in 2023 as in 2022. And when we started writing the book, really was during the beginnings of the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States. We were still in Brooklyn at the time. We had people marching down our street. We were from our window cheering them, on. And that being such a powerful moment of looking at systemic racism, and that it became this global movement everywhere. We saw in the UK and all over, people marching and talking more about systematic racism. It was like, this is why we need to tell this story right now. And so
this is urgent.
It's urgent. It's the urgency of the moment, right? So we couldn't be detracted from it. And I'm so glad that we weren't, detracted, even with illness. We just were like, we're going to get this done. And like Bryan said, we asked Patrick, like, you're going to go to all these different places. He went to Hawaii. His very first shoot was Bridget Coulter, Don Cheadle's house in Hawaii, which we were like,
oh my God.
Yeah, really wanted to be there for that one, but
what a cool shoot that must have been. Oh my God, I'm so sad y'all missed that one.
We were on the phone with them. We're like, oh, we can't go. But he was the only person we knew that could go into these homes, that could engage with the people, make them feel safe and comfortable, because we were going into people's homes before. I think there were we did have vaccines. We had vaccines. So he had just gotten vaccinated. But we wanted everyone to feel completely comfortable and just to know, like, to trust him, and they did. Everyone was so open to him, and he got to know the families, and he ended up friends with everybody. I think she does.
He came out with friends in every house,
That is brilliant. And I love that about him. He's such an engaging, warm person, and who I can't even believe that we don't get to experience his work in the world beyond this. I mean, was this one of his last big projects?
This was his last big project. This was and thankfully, before he passed, he actually was able to edit all of the imagery. So not only was this, all of the images that he took, but, with his hand editing them, it's his, in terms of the images, where they were the vision that we all were hoping that this could be. So, we feel like this is a wonderful, celebration of him too, and the incredible work that he did for so many years, showcasing some of the most beautiful spaces you've ever seen. Yeah.
Brilliant. What a lasting legacy for him, for his work to carry on. Really cool. So there were so many things that I loved about this book when I was reading through it. But I think the thing that resonated most was the element of safety home brings to Black Americans. So I'm just going to read a quote from the book. You say, when asked what their homes mean to them, safety was the first response of every homeowner in this book. Life in America is not safe for Black people and never has been. While the sense of safety our homes provide is not the same as physical security, home is a respite from the psychological pressures of the outside world. For that reason, Black homes are filled with comfortable things and things that comfort. End quote. So, can you speak a bit about this and the importance of home ownership and creating safe personal space in the Black community, especially now, these crazy days, time that we're living in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, yeah, that's exactly as it says. Life in America is not safe for Black people, and it never has been. And I think looking at it now, we see like the Breonna Taylors, the George Floyds, and knowing that, those are two of the most prominent, not even anymore the most recent names in a list that continues to be added to. And part of the reason why it was important for us to have the level of historical context in this book that we do. I mean, it starts at the point of emancipation and Reconstruction and follows all the way through to the onset of COVID-19, is to be able to clearly make the point that you're seeing the same cycles repeat themselves over and over again. So the violence that you see African Americans, Black Americans are subject to, are vulnerable to on a daily basis is no different now than it was during the Tulsa massacre or, before that, during, prior to the end of the Civil War or even during Jim Crow. So, I mean, it's the idea essentially that as Black people, we are not at home in America is one that's constantly being reiterated. And it's part of the reason why so little attention, so little representation is given to the Black family home, because the idea is essentially that you are not at home here. You can't be at home here, but we are at home here. This is our home. And part of telling the story in this historical context is to show how the journey to home for African Americans and the peaks and valleys in that story line up with some of the most pivotal moments in American history. So it's not a question of Black history. It's almost not even a question of American history. It's just a question of history. Right. And being able to weave those things together and really take a look at the reasons why it's missing in the first place. What are the motivations for its omission and what are the outcomes of its absence? And we do get a chance to take a look at some of those and the ways in which, design has to be understood as a cultural artifact that plays into this, this entire society as it works. So, because of that feeling, and it's a direct catalyst for the way that Black homes are designed, for the feelings that they work to evoke, and safety being paramount among those. Because at home, once you get home, there's a breath. It goes, I made it. Because we say this all the time. When someone is killed, when like a Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, Amadou Diallo, however far back you want to go, it's never about the person who's killed. It's always about everyone who's left. It's for Black people, for African Americans to know that it could be any of us at any time, and for any reason or no reason at all.
That's it.
We see traffic stops, are absolutely lethal statistically to African Americans, right? Because of police violence and other forms of violence, with Ahmaud Arbery, had nothing to do with the police, but he was, murdered as well. So because of that, every time you step out your door, that there's a question as to whether or not you'll see that door and that home again. So when you make it there, there's a breath.
It was interesting that, and we never, one, I will say, like, all of these homeowners were so generous and open with us about their stories. We didn't, we had a list of questions. We really didn't know where the conversation was going to go, but they all told us so much about their family histories and the first homes they remembered and their homes now and some of their struggles. And when we asked at the end of each interview, we would say, what does a Black family home mean to you? And every one of them answered safety. And that was really interesting because that's what it means for us too. And like Bryan said, I think that in America, there is an incredible weight to being Black. And you don't necessarily think about it, you just carry it, every single day. And so when we moved into this house where we're outside of New York City now, upstate, it was really important to me. I was saying to Bryan, like, I want this house to be super Black. Like, I want people to know that Black people live here. I want when they come in that they're like, there's art, there's representation of Blackness everywhere.
Which is basically every house we live in. But
I wanted that like feeling. And I also wanted that feeling of like that hug. Because I was really nervous of moving outside the city. New York is interesting in that New York had some of the most slave ports in the United States. A lot of people don't realize that slavery was huge here. And even though people think, oh, it's just the South, like, no. And actually, so there are lots of Black people all throughout New York, all throughout upstate.
And those ports, I mean, they came from the UK. The ships came from the UK to New York. It was
So exactly. So there actually is a big Black population here. And that helped us feel safe, and that we were like seeing other people that look like us. But also, just needing to feel like you have a respite, even just for a moment from all of the violence. But like Bryan said, knowing that even still, like Skip Gates, when the police officer, when his neighbor called the police on him when he walked into his own house that he had lived in for several years, and the neighbor was like, I don't know that guy, and it was kind of crazy, and the police came in his house. We all know as Black people that safety is never 100%. That anytime violence, racism can enter your space, but crafting space in a way that is comforting is, in a lot of ways, it's just part of survival. In a situation where you're constantly, your
survival is always in question. Like your survival is often a question. And so, that becomes one of the ways in which the world of an African American is very different than the world of a white American, whether you're occupying the same space, in some cases, even, regardless of how close you are, the world is a very different place for both. Because that sense of, as we said, physical security, that sense of safety is not the same as physical security. But it also, looking at, for us, again, so pushing, our understanding of what design is, and looking at it not as a skill, a pastime, an occupation, or even an industry, but looking at it as a cultural artifact. And seeing how it can be read back into the culture that creates it. You start to realize, as we kind of go through in the book, that, Black design as it exists is a response to a number of needs that American history has crafted for Black people in this country. And it's important to say in this country because, when we talk about the need for safety, for representation, for control, for celebration, for things like that, the need for those things, the need to express those things in your home where you have that level of control is very different in the US than it would be, in a nation that was all Black. So someplace in the Caribbean or someplace on the African continent. So the need for representation in that way would be a very different thing. But for us here, it becomes a very important thing because that's a constant fight outside of, safety is a constant struggle. Am I safe here is something that's always on your mind, even if it's in the back of your mind. But also, where am I seen? How am I seen? How am I represented? We look at even how Black homes have been represented, whether it's the homes of the celebrity athletes, actors, musicians, people who show up on TV, and then the idea that everyone else just lives in public housing. And then everyone's idea of public housing probably comes from an episode of Good Times that they saw a rerun of, with no idea of what may exist in between. One of the things that we did want to show with this book is that it's looking at African American design, or Black design in America, however you want to term it. It's not about the ways in which we would traditionally define the design style.
Right.
It doesn't come down to here are the colors you use, here's the era of furniture that you use, here are the stores you can get it from. The design in these homes are wildly different.
Totally.
We have everything from small, just amazing New York apartments to giant, sprawling 60 plus acre ranches. And they're all designed in very, very different ways. But it's that feeling, that vibe is the thing that connects them. And to understand how it's able to be expressed in so many different ways and why it continues to be a connection, regardless of whether you're in North Carolina, New York, San Diego, wherever you may be, or Hawaii, or Germany. We even have like one home that is in Germany. Is really a matter of understanding the needs that inspire that design style and how that design style speaks to those needs.
I think that also what comes out is the celebration of the Black home, and so I think from that standpoint of needing to feel safe, you also it also seems that the need to celebrate your own culture, and in the media it's just horrible what the African American community goes through, and being the way that you're perceived or talked about in the news, and or the stories that come up that are just so heartbreaking. Teens getting shot for just walking down the street with a hoodie on. Like, this is a place you need to come and just feel like you can celebrate yourself and where you come from. And that really comes through. I think that celebratory vibe comes through.
Oh, well, thank you. And I think our publisher will be so happy to hear that. I think it was a lot of, conversations about how do we write a book that is inspirational design, tells a historical narrative, tells these individual stories as well, but that is still celebratory. And I think that was something that we had to kind of really talk to the publisher about, is that the Black experience in America is joy and pain. And we have to present all of that to really sort of show the fullness of our experience. And so we can't leave the painful pieces out, because we've gone through that. And to me, it shows incredible resilience. The painful pieces are also why we celebrate, because we are continuing to still move forward for equality, globally. And so, that celebration, like, we got to celebrate, we have to celebrate every stride that we have made. And for so many of these homeowners, it is a celebration for them too, buying a house, being able to have a place where their family has a future, where they can, raise their children, hopefully have something as an heirloom that they can leave to them. And then for some people, they didn't own their house, but they had these incredible, apartments and spaces that were filled with heirlooms and pieces that were passed down and that their mother gave, grandparents gave. And that is part of that celebrating those joyful things, and knowing that we've achieved so much and that we can still go on to achieve more.
Yeah, there's so much joy. I mean, every homeowner that we talk to, I mean, even for ourselves, I mean, just there's so much enjoyment, there's so much pleasure, there's so much warmth and love. I mean, people who raised families and so many children, people who they these places they love, but they live around the corner from their mom, so they always have family nearby, and that's what the Black family home is. It is joy, but for us, we felt the responsibility was to show joy in context, because the way that, again, we start talking about these tropes and representation. And so, like, it's always divided. We're either talking about Black joy, in which case it's all joy, 100%, just people dancing, or we're talking about Black suffering, in which case it's 100% suffering and degradation and misery, and that's it. And we felt like it was such an important thing to be able to actually show the two together, to show, because you can't see the relationship. You can't see how, like, they are both at once part of the Black experience in this country. And so to divide them, to look at one without the other is a half measure. And we certainly didn't want to write something that people could point to and say, look, here's 16 Black people with great houses, so everything's fine. Because, that's very clearly not the case. And so knowing at the outset of this book, being inspired in part to write this book by the understanding that, African-American homeownership has dropped to levels not seen since before the signing of the Fair Housing Act. And this is before COVID. So this is just coming out of the Great Recession, in the early 2000s. And then COVID hit. And so now we're seeing, its increased impact and what's happening. So we absolutely couldn't write a book that just said, hey, Black people have houses, this is great. We had to write something that would talk about, the rest of the story and try to inspire us to kind of continue to see that this journey is ongoing.
Yeah. I really love the history and background that you share in the book. Sections about the African American experience of home that began long before emancipation, the Great Migration, and the journey home from the Great Depression to the Great Recession. All of those segments that you put into the book with historical background was brilliant. And what came across is that for the Black home in particular, history cannot be separated from design, and the struggle to find home persists. So I'm going to read another quote, if you don't mind. You state, like every part of culture, design is shaped by history. The shape of American history has created a set of needs for African Americans, which are reflected in our homes. Much as we have with food, music, and dance, African Americans have used design as a way of meeting those needs. African American design is uniquely experiential in that it isn't defined by look as much as it is by feel. There are no defined color palettes or furniture styles. Instead, it uses a diverse array of approaches to craft environments that evoke feelings such as safety, control, visibility, celebration, and memory. Each of these plays an important role in the feeling of home that these spaces convey. Control as an element of African American design is about the ease with which our creative decisions are made. Home offers a space that doesn't have to be carved out, contended for, or defended once won. It doesn't ask us to explain ourselves, speak for our race, ignore its microaggressions, or be on call for teachable moments. One never asks to touch your home. That was a really powerful moment when I was reading it. You continue to say, in place of all that, home gives us the control we need to express and represent ourselves freely. I think we just touched on a lot of that, obviously. But then I was even more moved. So you say that the Black family home is missing character and is a missing character in American history, is part of the work this country has been doing since 1619 to send a very clear and direct message that African Americans and all Black people are not at home in America. But this is our home, and against all the headwinds of legal oppression, social violence, and economic marginalization, Black people have and will continue to make ourselves at home in the country that many of our ancestors helped to build and in which we all have a vested interest. And in our continuing story, there is value for all Americans. Between those two, the first quote was earlier on in the book in the introduction, and then that last bit was later on in one of those highlighted historical segments that you added into the book. And I think that, that's where it got me. Seeing the family homes and the color and the warmth, that was powerful. But when you start thinking about these deeper topics of, you're not welcome in your own country, that is not right. And that is so important in this story of design. So I think it was really important to include that background in the book. I think it's brilliant.
I think that I'm going to say this man is so brilliant. Like he Bryan is so good at taking really complex ideas and then, just these statements. And I was like, both those things you read, that was all him. I'm there like, I can curate the homes and talk about the design and, I'm a good editor. I will go through and, okay, we've got to we have to cut these words out just because you have only so many words, so many pages.
What, is Bryan wordy?
Right, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. So, but then how he gets across these really complex ideas, I always love that. And before I know, I'm going to give you a chance to talk, but I wanted to just say that when we started this book, it was, I was like, we should do this book that's going to be about house tours of Black homes. And honestly, at first he was like, I don't really see why we need to do that. Like, why is this necessary? This doesn't seem like a book that really needs to be, that's something that we need to do. And it started for me because I was reading an article, I don't remember where it was about Juneteenth. And they were talking about when emancipation occurred in the United States and how Black people were just the government was like, you cannot, keep people enslaved any longer. So the plantations had to release people. And when the plantations did that, the plantation owners did that, they were done. So people were on the streets, and for many years, Black people died at enormous numbers from disease, lack of care. People would just be dead on the streets, and people would walk by and walk past their bodies. And it was something that it stuck with me so much. Like I was like, I can't even understand what that could be like.
Yeah.
And it made me think this is where the story of home begins for my ancestors. And taking that to Bryan and saying, okay, we're going to do something with these house tours, but we need to tell that story. And he brilliantly tells that story with the journey home, those historical chapters that are in the book.
All right, so this also might be a little wordy, but it'll be worth it. I'm going to try and make it worth it. First, I do want to say something about Jeanine also as an editor, because, I love the book and I love it in its final form. What I originally wrote was about twice as long. So
I believe that knowing you for so long.
So she cut a good 30, 40,000, because when I'm writing, I was like, there's an idea. And you have to get the idea across. Because to what I love about doing books is that, to me, it's like, this is one thought. It's just the ability to take one thought and follow it through as completely as you possibly can, but it's still just the one idea. And so when she did first bring it to me, the idea of just doing this coffee table book that was about, Black family home house tours, I never want to write something that's just a design book. So it was like, well, when we came on this idea of the journey to home, and what does that mean across centuries? But then what does it also mean for the individual? So now we're not just walking through someone's house going, okay, well, here's a chair, here's a table, here's a nice bookshelf. We're saying, what is the whole story of how you from not only you, but your parents here, the first question we asked everybody was, what's the first home you remember? Because your story of home, your understanding of home begins with that first home that you recall, and it builds and it grows with every home that you have after that. And so being able to trace that story and then trace it back beyond even the person that we're talking to and find those connection points to these larger stories, is how it started to come together. But I love the two quotes that you just read, because I do feel like they fit together and they bookend so well. So I'm so happy that you brought up specifically in that list of characteristics, control, because it is as much as we talk about safety, like that idea of control of freedom can't really be stated, because wherever we are as Black people outside of our homes, there's always the question, what are you doing here? Why are you here?
Right.
You know, and it doesn't matter where you are. You could be in a museum. You could be, again, we saw with Skip Gates, you could be in your own home and people are still asking, why are you here? What right do you have? So it's the same, you know, we know, we look back in history and have this idea of freedom papers. And then we talk in the book, you know, after emancipation, and as the prison industry came to take over the role of slavery for Black people in America, it became about employment papers. Do you have a job? If you didn't have a job, that was illegal, and you could be arrested. For loitering,
which I didn't realize until I read this, and I was like, "Whoa, that I did not know." So
and then once you were arrested, you could be leased out, and we still do prisoner leasing today. So you know, that idea of being able to just to have a space where you can just create, you know, a lot of the amazing things that we see in these interiors come out of the simple fact that home was where these people were able to be as creative as they wanted to be. I mean, if you look at the homes like Paul Pat's, you know, the amazing artists, or you look at like John Goodman, his home, it was like, here I can do whatever I want. And nobody asks me. I don't have to explain it to anybody. And if anybody does ask me, I tell them it's my home. I do what I like here. And that is such a rare thing, as we say, you know, like you don't have to fight for it. You don't have to carve it out. You don't have to defend it. You know, no one feels like they have the access to just walk up and touch your home, you know, and there's such empowerment in that for Black people. And then as we talk about the ways in which that is a response to the needs that history creates for our community, you know, when you look at these headwinds that are listed at the end, you know, legal oppression. So you're talking about everything from redlining and race covenants to the highway system that was used to destroy Black communities, eminent domain, things that continue to be going on today. And now we're seeing everything from Hurricane Katrina to right now, right at this very moment, the COVID-19 crisis being used as an opportunity and excuse to further projects of gentrification in places all over this country that we won't hear about, that will not be openly acknowledged for maybe another 5 to 10 years when it's over and like everybody's gone and Harlem is no longer Black and Baltimore is no longer Black, and then like Philly and DC, and when everyone's gone, then they'll go, oh, well, you know what? This really happened around COVID, but it's happening right this moment.
Exactly.
So what we're seeing and what we try to point out in this is how this is part of this suite of overlapping oppressions that they give each other a very useful sense of plausible deniability. So, for example, just using COVID as an example, we don't have to talk about how Black neighborhoods are being taken over or how gentrification is taking leaps and bounds during this moment, because the pandemic is just killing so many African Americans. We've been talking about it from the very beginning, like a couple of weeks into the pandemic, we started seeing reports of who was dying broken along racial lines. And I felt that to be so telling about the country we live in, because who looks at a lethal virus and decide that the important statistic to pull out of this is the skin color and the ethnic background of the people who are dying, as if the virus had a preference. All right. But if the virus is killing all the Black people, the virus is clearing out all of these homes, then you don't have to talk about the gentrification of who's moving in. You know, same thing that happened with Katrina. If the water cleared all of these people out, if it killed so many, if it destroyed all of these homes, and when these homes are rebuilt, well, now they're brand new, you know, wonderful, beautiful homes. We're not really paying attention to who moved in and what was lost in that process. And so it becomes this, but it doesn't always have to be that clean. We talk about places like Oscarville or Seneca Village that were actually just sort of destroyed through violence and were either, you know, made part of a man-made lake or were turned into, I think Seneca Village became part of Central Park. And so, you know, you see that going, but it's easy to give plausible deniability to that expansion of gentrification if you're like, well, it was the virus. But it doesn't have to be the virus, because you can say that, oh, well, why are there no Black people that live in this area? Well, this is a very affluent area. Black people don't have as much money. Well, they don't have as much money because even with, you know, regardless of education, there's a pay disparity. You know, there's a wealth disparity. There's an inheritance disparity, both of which are very largely predicated on a housing disparity. But if you're not going to look at all of them together, then it just becomes, well, you know, you just don't see them here, or they don't do enough to get here.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Ben, about like, you know, Bryan always says, you know, slavery, you know, is a foundational trauma in America, and what becomes the United States of America. I mean, the first trauma in this country was the destruction of Native American communities before there was even an America, and then slavery, you know, occurs, and so it's woven through everything. And I think that's what you really do see in that journey home, and also the experiences of Black homeowners. You know, we definitely have an idea to expand the concept of this book to other parts of the diaspora. And so it's our hope to be able to come to Europe to tell the stories of Black people in the Caribbean, to tell the stories of throughout of different countries throughout the African continent, and how colonization impacted Africa and the idea of home. And so I'm hoping that is something that if people come and get this book and pre-order it, and we get good numbers, that we can say to our publisher, hey, we want to continue to tell the story. Right now we're telling the story in America because those are our ancestors. But I think there's so many more stories to be told. And it would be really exciting for us to go and be able to go to other parts of the diaspora to talk about what others have gone through as well.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting here in the UK to start digging and uncovering a lot of the stories here, and especially with the Windrush generation here. So I think that would be really, let me just have a word with your publishers. So while we're on this topic, I just wanted to ask if you can, one thing that really made me start thinking was, you know, institutional racism, and in America specifically, because we're on this subject of America, that is designed to alienate and prevent the African American community from achieving the American dream of home ownership, and how it continues today. So from preventing land ownership by anyone other than white men, to more recently, the access of PPP loans. So we were just discussing this, but, you know, can you talk a bit more about beyond COVID, how it shows up in the prevention of, you know, accessing the American dream, and that, you know, ultimate joy of that goal of home ownership?
Yeah. I mean, the American dream, you know, was, you know, never considered for Black people. That is white.
It wasn't designed
male, you know, a white male institution, right?
Totally.
Of the you know, American dream.
It wasn't for women as well.
No, it was not for women. It was not for anyone other than a white
man.
heterosexual male who owned property and had some level of, you know, currency and power. It's, you know, something that it's this journey of, you're, like you said, you're never at home here. And that is drilled in from the very beginning of Black people arriving to this country. So for African Americans during the period of slavery, you didn't actually you had slave quarters. And the slave quarters were off of the big house. And they actually were not any sort of home at all. They had bare floors, many of them. They were not comfortable in any way. And they were extensions of the big house. So they were many times the kitchen. They were, or, you know, a hearth that was there. And then you basically, you know, grew, I actually think it was Frederick Douglass who actually said, you know, he grew up in the kitchen, you know, that was his house. And so that idea of you're never really home, there is no comfortable place for you, continues, over 400 years in this country. And so there is always that feeling of this is not for you, and it's not for you to attain. And so what we find is, even for many of our homeowners in this book, they actually are pointing out to us things like race covenants in Tracy and Amir Smith, who lives outside of San Diego. That property that they bought, still in the contract, is the race covenant that
I was going to mention that.
Yeah. And it's
that
incredible,
says,
right?
Can you tell everybody what it said?
Yeah, that you cannot sell this home to a Black person. Like, it says that in the covenant. So, these things, they're still there. And even the experiences of Camille and Joe, who talked about just the hardship that they went through trying to buy their home and feeling like they had to write letters, and they were trying to get people to basically sponsor them to say, we are a good family and we deserve to be able to buy this home. And we're coming up against so many walls to the point that it was like, okay, this is racism because it's not making sense. And our own experience buying a home and what we went through, it was not easy. And it was not, we talked to friends who were white and we're like, hey, like, this is happening. Has this ever happened to you? To the point where to get our home, I actually had to write a letter to the president of the bank because there was a specific woman who, every time we were about to get to closing, she would just be like, oh, but you don't have this paper. Oh, you don't have this. And I'd be like, well, first, you never told us that we needed to have this. Like, it's not on the list. And what are you talking about? And eventually I wrote a letter to the president saying, this person is definitely doing things that are stepping in front of us being able to get our home. And I've talked to other people and they haven't gone through this. And now I can only figure that this is racism. And finally, after that letter went through, like within 48 hours, we finally got our loan approved. So
even if it hadn't been for, some really amazing help, and even a personal relationship of, we were going to basically my family banks, a place my family's been banking with since I was a child. And my parents had such a great relationship with one person in particular there. And if that person hadn't stepped up and basically stayed late on a night to help us navigate, it was still a thing of the paperwork that had to get in and things that were done. And it was a question of seconds at the end of a Friday before our closing got pushed back something like another 3 months. And so because this person stepped up and, a few other people saw what we were going through and were willing to kind of take a couple of extra seconds. But
you shouldn't have to jump through these hoops.
Right. Like, should it be a fight of a couple of extra seconds?
No.
And for me, I'm not even really going to try to answer this question. But one of the things I love so much about this book is being an avowed, recovering academic, lifelong nerd. I love that we put a bibliography at the end of it.
Yes, I noticed that.
For a couple of reasons.
Yes.
For one, because understanding that there is as we talk about systematic racism, the ways in which it's woven into American culture, society, there's an instinctive reaction of disbelieving Black experience. When somebody says, this is what's happened to me, we always go, but was it really as bad? Was slavery really as bad? Was prison really, was it really what you're saying it was? And so it's important to be able to say, here's where a lot of this information comes from. It's not the full bibliography, but some of the most important ones. But it's also a way of pointing out places where you can read more and learn more from people who are better at a particular aspect of this than we are, So being able to look at, work like that's being done, a lot of it being done by Black economists like Janelle Jones, like William Darity Jr., who are both, I think just amazing, really starts to dig into a lot of information that more people need to have, because, we're encouraged by the society, by, representations in media and things like that. to believe that this is a simple situation and that it's just the way that it is, without reference to all of the time and history that's gone into making it this way, or the things that are being done right now to keep it this way.
Oh, I mean, I feel like we could talk about this for not just hours, days, weeks, and months and years.
Yes,
we should talk about this.
Yeah.
It should be a course. You need to have a course, Bryan. I think you need to teach.
We need to do it together because, like, you know, look, it's also because if I don't have her, then I'll just go on for way too long. You know,
Jeanine should also have a course. I mean, y'all should have an AphroChic course. We'll talk. We'll discuss at the end of the show.
I like that.
Or after the show.
Yeah, I mean, talk to you know, like we're happy to come to Oxford if y'all are offering. You know, like we would love to do more like a professors in residence type of deal.
I'll have to call my people. I have to share one of my favorite quotes in the book.
And I love that you have so many favorite quotes. That's awesome.
Well, this is just like, it just got me thinking. And I was like, one of the things that I noticed right away was all of the color in the book, like the vibrancy. And so one of my favorite quotes was from Shauna Freeman. And she stated, "Color is an heirloom." And I was just like, yes, that one quote, "Color is an heirloom." One thing that really stands out in these homes is the owner's relationship to color. And the book is so vibrant, and the homes evoke so much joy and comfort and love. And I just had to share that was one of my, I have a lot of favorite quotes in the book.
I'm so I keep on quoting the book. We're both so glad that you have a lot of favorite quotes. And I think it's just, we've been asked about things like color, and people are like, "Oh, did you like go and make sure you found like colorful homes?" We're like, no, we just went to people that we liked and that we knew were very authentic people and asked them to be a part of the book. But I think that African Americans aren't afraid of color. And that actually just goes throughout the diaspora. Like, there is no fear of color. I have
bold choices.
I've often been
really
struck, by, sort of what is sort of like the normal American home, where it's like people get really afraid of color. Like, I'm just like, it literally is just like paint. It's okay. Like, it's fine. Like, if you don't like
not
it,
forever.
Paint over it.
You can like get rid of it. And people will have this like, I can't do it. It's too much. And for Black homes, it's always been like color, sometimes to degrees that I don't embrace. African Americans loved, in the 90s, it was very common to go into an African American relative's home, go to a relative's home and see an orange wall or a yellow wall. And those are like some of the hardest colors to design with. But people loved it because they're like, oh, it's like the sunset and it just is so warm and there's this warmth that happens. But what we do love, especially from a design perspective, is that embrace of color and just embracing decorating your home freely. Like, it doesn't need to be a painful enterprise. It doesn't need to be overthought. We tell people this all the time. Like, you don't have to be wealthy. You don't it really is just about what it says to you and also how you're telling your story. And that's where the design begins. And color is such a big part of that because color evokes memory. And whether it's something like, oh, I just loved blue because maybe you had a blue room as a child, or something that just attracted you or always calmed you, and people want to integrate that into their home. So I love that culturally we embrace color, we embrace art, we embrace having fun with our homes. And in the end, that's why so many of these homes are so authentic and interesting, is because every one of these folks, they just really, embrace what they loved, and it's there in a very authentic way. Yeah,
they're all just being them. I mean, and there are ways even to do like the orange and yellow. I mean, Alexander Smalls' home just is, that quintessential African-American color palette of like the orange wall, the yellow wall. But then at the same time, what I love so much about his home is it's the combination it expresses him so succinctly and so beautifully when you read his story, because his place is this combination 1920s Harlem Renaissance parlor and North Carolina country kitchen.
South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Yes.
Yeah, he will get me on that. But the reason I said North Carolina, so like, don't hurt me, Alexander. The reason I said North Carolina is because you had me thinking about Shauna. And what was so amazing with Shauna was that even for her, stepping into that level of personal expression for her was a decision. It was a choice. And it was something that she had to take a step at a time. So she said, like, the first room she did was the bright pink room.
Yes,
like
I love.
Her girl did. And it was and just like Jeanine said, she said, I'm going to try it. It's going to be up here in this back room that I'm not really using. If it looks crazy, then at least nobody will see it.
she said, if it looks crazy, I could shut the door.
Right, I can shut the door.
Something like that, yeah.
No one will see
I can shut the door, nobody will see it, and I can figure out what to do with it later. But it turned out to be amazing. And it got her started on, like, well, then let me do this other room. Like, and the blue room is fantastic. The gold ceiling and all, it is an amazing space. The Moroccan influence and the Egyptian influences and all these things that come into it, things that come from, her family and her history. And so all of those things together, but it started her on this path of going, well, I'm going to express myself a little bit here. Yeah. And I like where that's going. So now I'm going to do it. And now she's got to this place where it's like this, like every inch of the place is amazing, because then her art collection came in with things that she'd been collecting since, living in Virginia, but then especially when she was living in New York, like Brooklyn, she's got the Tribe Called Quest, quotes framed and all of these amazing things. And because she just started to occupy her own space, and she's just started to take that moment. And it doesn't always go right. I'm gonna admit, like the home I grew up in, seafoam green.
It's a hard color.
I'm not going to say
it's a difficult color.
I'm not going to say that it can't be done. I will say, in my own experience, I don't feel like we landed it quite. I don't know if we didn't do it justice. But then also in our defense, when we moved into the house, I was 5 years old. It had this bright orange wall-to-wall carpeting.
Oh, wow.
That didn't eventually go. Like that's not there anymore. But that carpeting was kind of like where we started. So we were, we had some things to overcome. Yeah. I don't know who made that choice, whoever lived there before, but it was a choice. So some people just have it, like they just had that. They went into that space and they said, I need this to feel like me. Mm-hmm. And I think one of my favorite examples of that is Paul Supat, because as an artist and just this amazing use of paints and textures and all these things in this dream world that he says he's existed in since growing up in Jamaica. And then he took his home and said, this is my world. And now he looks at it as that thing that he needs in order to be able to go out and face the world every day. He's like, I need to start from here. And when I'm out, I need to know that I'm coming back here. And that's what home is. And that's why the color is important and everything that goes into it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I want to live in so many of those rooms. And the houses are really cool. So the book is available on the 15th of November. How do we pre-order it?
You can pre-order it by heading to the website, and you can also pre-order on Amazon. Yes. So, I will say though, we don't get it. Pre-order on Amazon is what most people do. And we just know that that's how folks buy books. And so you can absolutely pre-order on Amazon, AphroChic.com, and you can also visit Penguin Random House, and you can pre-order there as well.
You can also pre-order through our Instagram account.
Yeah, it's kind of, and honestly, if you just type in AphroChic, celebrating the legacy of the Black family home, it's actually pretty cool. We've seen you can pre-order in Japan, you can pre-order all over the world. So wherever books are sold in your part of the world, you will find that you can pre-order there.
Perfect. That's so exciting. Okay, people, pre-order the book. Okay, well, it means so much to me that you were able to join me today for our extended gallery date. A gallery date first. Let's make sure it's not the last one. I would love to have you back on the show.
We love you. We thank you for your great questions. You are awesome at this. So I'm excited to catch more of the episodes. And
thank you.
This is fantastic. This is you in your element. I totally love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I miss y'all so much and I love you. And I'm really so excited for you. This is really, really cool. And I'm so honored that you took so much time to chat with me about the book. And I cannot wait for the world to read it. It's so well done. And congratulations again. And thank you for letting me take a first look at it. And I just love it. Okay, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in to The Gallery Date. Join me for our date every Wednesday for a bite-sized episode on thegallerydate.com. Please follow, rate, and review The Gallery Date on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. This episode was sponsored by JennSingerGallery.com. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you soon.